Chapter 19. Hannibal Lecter. At only 28 years old, he was already an associate professor at the University of Massachusetts. He was a gentle and knowledgeable person. It was said that everyone who met him praised his politeness. Professor Lecter is a scholar who is very knowledgeable in psychology. In the car, Ray gently said to Siddle, "He is also very good at communicating with children. Mom believes you will like him." Siddle, isn't this redundant? This Hannibal Lecter was chosen as an associate professor of psychology at such a young age, so of course his level of psychology was beyond question. She looked at Ray's slender fingers intertwined in front of her, and she knew what he was thinking at a glance. Ray couldn't help but feel anxious, perhaps because she was afraid that she would be diagnosed with some kind of psychological problem. What could Siddle do? She could only obediently blink and nod in response to Ray's repeated instructions. "Mom," the little girl promised softly, "I will definitely show my most obedient and sensible side in front of Mr. Lecter." The car quickly stopped in front of an apartment building. Ray led Siddle to knock on the door of a private apartment. "Hello, I am the guest who made an appointment with you yesterday." Ray extended his hand to the young man, his blue eyes filled with an expectant smile. "I remember, madam." The young man chuckled and extended his hand to return Ray's kindness. He smiled and said, "You were a philosophy professor at Brown University, weren't you? I had the honor of seeing you speak at an academic conference in London 3 years ago, and I was very impressed. Is this your daughter?" He turned his attention to Siddle. A gentle smile appeared on the man's handsome face, and a faint dimple appeared on his left cheek. What a lovely child. The young man had a striking appearance, a gentle expression and indigo eyes that revealed a joyful smile. He greeted Siddle like a gentleman, took her fair hand like an adult, looked straight into her eyes and said with a smile, "I'm very happy to meet you, my sweet, lovely girl." Siddle looked back at Hannibal, her heart suddenly skipped a beat in front of the man's sincere eyes like moonlight. Her radar started working. With Ray by her side, Siddle could only stay calm, showing an innocent smile that a child should have, happily shaking Hannibal's hand. "Nice to meet you, Uncle Hannibal." Hannibal led Ray and Siddle into the apartment. This was a private apartment with a simple and elegant style, crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling, beige wallpaper covering the entire wall, brown wooden bookcases and matching tables and chairs. The furniture in the living room was neatly arranged. The person living here probably had a lot of common sense in life. Siddle was left behind by Ray. Before Hannibal and Ray left together, he specially took some candy for Siddle. The man smiled and rubbed her head. Siddle suddenly felt a chill when she was touched, and her eyes widened in fear. She didn't like being touched casually by strangers. Moreover, this was the man who had started her radar. After all, the candy Hannibal gave was also thrown onto the table by Siddle. After all, a good child shouldn't casually eat what strangers gave them. Moreover, Siddle didn't like sweets either. She sat on the sofa dejectedly, not knowing what Ray and Hannibal were talking about in the room. Siddle, who was in a mess, began to look for anything interesting in the living room, and soon her eyes were attracted by the pile of books on the bookshelf in the living room. There were various books on the bookshelf, from 365 recipes to Introduction to the Art of Sketching the Human Body, and under 300 poems was The Lucifer Effect. Siddle was so fascinated that she almost couldn't help but open it, but she had to hold back because she was in someone else's house. Just as she was carefully examining the books that interested her the most, and was preparing to read them when she got home, the door to the study opened. Ray and Hannibal walked out one after another. Before Siddle could react, Hannibal had already walked to her side. His eyes were a little strange as he looked at the girl standing in front of his bookshelf, but he controlled his emotions before Siddle glanced over, and spoke in a low voice as if he was chatting. "Which book do you like?" Siddle glanced at him. "I like them all." She was honestly interested in everything, including books on cooking and psychology, and most of the books on this bookshelf were specialized in psychology. "Hannibal." He was startled, and couldn't help but chuckle. "My dear, Because of his height, he bent down to look at Siddle, with his deep indigo eyes filled with laughter, and said leisurely, being too greedy is not a good thing. Siddle really wanted to say, what the hell does it have to do with you, but for many reasons, she held back, and could only continue to smile innocently like a lily. Thank you for reminding me, I understand. She wouldn't change anyway, Siddle thought indifferently. For some reason, Hannibal acted so sincerely that even Siddle couldn't sense his other emotions except sincerity. However, the more he acted like this, the more Siddle felt that he was a hypocrite. She didn't know why Ray would seek out such a person for psychological counseling. Either Ray had been tricked, or this hypocrite had tricked everyone. So do you like any books? Hannibal didn't seem to care about Siddle's answer. He stood up straight and looked at his bookshelf with interest, remembering where Siddle had just looked, for example, this book. He thought for a moment and then pulled out 300 nursery rhymes. Siddle. Do you like this book? Hannibal looked at her with a smile on his lips and opened the book. It just so happens that my sister also liked nursery rhymes before. His gaze towards Siddle was gentle and soft, but Siddle was suddenly startled. She felt a chill run down her spine. For a moment, she seemed to feel that Hannibal was looking at someone else through her, even that person was a dead person. She was scared to the point of breaking out in a cold sweat by her own association. Seeing Hannibal still looking at her gently, Siddle instinctively walked to the bookshelf and randomly pulled out a book. This is the one I just saw. Her intuition told her that it was better not to mention nursery rhymes now. Hannibal saw the title of the book in her hand. He was silent for a moment, then smiled inexplicably. So you like it? Siddle. She had a bad feeling, not knowing what she had picked up again. She looked down and saw that in her hand was the book, The Lucifer Effect. The cover of the book had large, clear black fonts, briefly introducing the content of the book. Why can a good person become a bad person? Siddle. No, wait. She could explain. Siddle angrily turned to look at Ray, who was indeed sitting on the sofa, leisurely enjoying tea and glancing at her with approval. Strangely enough, Ray and Hannibal had only met for 10 minutes, and when they appeared before Siddle again, Siddle could feel that her nervousness and anxiety about coming here had lessened. Oh. Are psychology professors that magical? Siddle muttered to herself, reluctantly taking Hannibal's outstretched hand, pretending to be innocent, raising her head to ask, should I call you Uncle Hannibal, or Dr. Lecter? Hannibal paused for a moment, lowered his head to look at her and smiled. You can call me whatever you want, my dear. But calling me doctor is really a bit early now, he said leisurely. After all, my medical license hasn't been approved yet. Siddle. So this guy doesn't even have a medical license. Where did her mother find this kind of no good to treat her daughter? She suddenly thought of the highly respected, incredibly capable priest that her father sought out. She wondered if the wound on the priest's neck that Annabelle had scratched had healed yet. Hannibal led Siddle into the study, placed the Lucifer Effect on the table, and carried her to sit on the soft leather chair. I don't think you mind waiting a while. The chair was opposite the study. The sandalwood table was clean, neat, and well-proportioned, just like this study. The overall style was very simple and elegant. There were 3 huge bookcases placed here, compared to the decorative bookcases in the living room. The books and documents displayed in this room were clearly more professional. There was a small stove burning on the table, and on the stove was a purple clay teapot. The man took out a purple clay tea set, bent down, the firelight from the stove reflected on half of his face and straight nose.